Always trust.
We ask the questions.
What is needed in the world?
Istaknuti novinar i publicista. Jedan od rijetkih grčkih intelektualaca koji su pisali i govorili o ulozi grčkih dobrovoljaca u ratu u Bosni i Hercegovini, posebno o njihovoj ulozi u genocidu u Srebrenici. Sugrađani su ga nazivali izdajnikom, priječeno mu je smrću. Policija ga je štitila 24 sata dnevno. O grčko-srpskim odnosima, dobrovoljcima, ratnim zločinima i Zlatnoj zori. Za Al Jazeeru govori Takis Michas.
So, Mr. Takis, first of all, thank you for agreeing to speak to Al Jazeera. As we know, these days many people around the world are commemorating the 20th anniversary of the genocide in Srebrenica. In your opinion, what lessons has the world drawn from the war in Bosnia and the genocide in that small Bosnian town?
I think there are two questions here, whether the world has drawn any lessons, which I'm not in a position to answer because this is a complex question. And the second question is what lessons the world should draw from Srebrenica. And I think the basic lesson the world should draw from Srebrenica is that people who purport, who commit those crimes, should face the consequences of their actions.
Now, the ICTY, the UN's War Crimes Tribunal, has labeled the killings in Srebrenica as an act of genocide. Yet we have people around the world who continue to deny it or who say it was justified in a way. What do you make of that? Is denial the final stage of a genocide?
It's complicated. There are two kinds of objections to the genocide. Some of them, they may be wrong, but they are well-meaning. They argue that, for example, if we generalize the concept of genocide, if we use it too often, then we get an inflation of the term, and this will become meaningless. On the other hand, there are also those who, in effect, when they are saying that this was not a genocide, what they imply is that this was no crime. So what they are doing by saying this is not genocide is total denial.
Now, you gained a lot of prominence around the world with your groundbreaking work on the role of Greek nationals who fought alongside the Serb army and who were present in Srebrenica when it fell. Now, could you elaborate to us, when did you first find out about the role of Greek nationals fighting alongside the Serb army in Bosnia?
Well, it wasn't a big secret, and I didn't discover any secret. During the war in Bosnia, these people were giving interviews all over the Greek media, the Greek press, and they were considered as heroes by very many people. And their participation in Srebrenica, some of them, their participation and the hoisting of the Greek flag were things that were widely reported in the Greek media. So in that sense, I simply reported again what other people had reported in the media, what they themselves were saying. And it's very funny that, of course, after the ICTY started looking for the people who were responsible for Srebrenica, etc., then, of course, they stopped giving interviews and they tried to disappear. And everybody tried to forget the story. And what I simply did was I sort of reminded the world of and reminded especially my countrymen, I mean, because the book was primarily written for Greeks, about the existence of these people. And the idea was that those people should somehow be arrested, debriefed, so that the Greek state would find out what they were doing in Srebrenica and elsewhere.
But as far as I know, not a single person has been arrested.
Not a single person has been arrested. Not a single person has been investigated. I was called once to provide evidence to the public prosecutor about their role, etc. I presented the names, but then the investigating judge seemed not to care very much or to be interested, and the investigation was dropped.
But in 2005, a Greek deputy called Andrias Andrianopoulos called for an investigation to be carried out. Up till today, nothing has been ever produced. In whose interest would it be to block such an investigation?
It's a complex thing. It's not exactly that it is in somebody's particular interest. But let us face it, those volunteers were the top of the iceberg, in the sense that the greatest part, the biggest part of the Greek society and of the Greek political and business class supported the Serbian war effort. So nobody's really interested in Greece, apart from a small minority, of opening up this Pandora's box, of opening up this case again. Because people think that if we open this case, if we start talking about what the support of Greece towards Serbia during that period, if we open all these things, then that would be a bad, that would hurt the image of Greece. So what the people prefer to do here is hide everything under the rugs so that we don't talk about it.
Now, explain to me, in the early 1990s and during the wars in Bosnia and in Kosovo, to what extent was the Greek public aware that they were supporting a side in Bosnia that was openly persecuting and ethnically cleansing the Bosnian Muslims? Were they aware of the atrocities committed by the Serb army?
They didn't want to be aware. You see, when you have decided, it's a part of human psychology, when you have decided beforehand who are the good guys and who are the bad guys, then you don't try to find evidence which go contrary to your beliefs. Now Greeks, the majority of the Greeks, had decided from the very beginning that in this conflict, Serbs were their friends because of their religion, because of traditional historic ties. And so they were not interested in stories which proved that the Serbs were the chief perpetrators. To give you some very simple examples, because I'm in the media, I mean, we didn't have any reporter. No Greek media had a reporter based in Sarajevo. All the Greek reporting was done from Belgrade and from Pale. So that's one thing. There wasn't a single investigation, there wasn't a single reporter who was sent by his newspaper or his media to the Bosnian held areas. All the investigating reporting was, all the correspondents were sent to the Serb held areas of Bosnia. So in that sense, there wasn't very much interest. And I remember every time I was trying, not only me and very many other journalists who were trying to present a balanced view, who were trying to write about what was happening to the Bosnians, we always had problems. We always had problems. We always had to argue why it is important. And you know, if you work in a newspaper, and you know how it is, you get tired of trying all the time to present something which you know that your editor doesn't like, which you know that perhaps will reduce the circulation of the paper because people don't want to read about this thing. So you give up.
You personally received death threats during your work?
Yes, but let's not make too much out of it. Yes, I received death threats. I was receiving, there was a period where I would receive an average of 2 to 3 death threats a week. I wasn't the only one. But then again, I didn't take those things seriously, and they were not serious after all.
Now, to what extent was the Greek state and the Greek Orthodox Church involved in calling upon young men from Greece to join the Serb army in Bosnia? As far as I know, there were cases of priests in churches during Sunday service calling upon the young men to take up arms and join their brothers in Serbia and in the Serbian-controlled parts of Bosnia.
No, no, I don't know of any statement by Greek state asking for Greeks to serve as volunteers in the Serbian army. No, that was not the case. Neither did the church ask for Greeks to go and fight for the Serbs. What happened was that some Greek priests went repeatedly to the Serb-held area of Bosnia, and they were conducting liturgies and services together with the Serb priests, and they were also going to the barracks, to the army barracks, and praying for the Serb soldiers, etc. But no, they didn't ask. The volunteer, what I blame the Greek state is not so much that they called on Greeks to help the Serb army, which they didn't. What, however, was the problem is that they never tried to stop the recruitment of volunteers by various organizations who were sending those volunteers to Serbia. I mean, these volunteers, those people who went to Serbia, they were openly advertising where they could join them. When they were giving interviews in the newspapers, they would always say, and if you want to contact us, and if you want to go to Serbia to fight, this is the telephone number, this, etc. And then the Greek authorities never interfered to stop
So
it.
they were fully aware of what was happening, but they let it pass.
Yes.
Serbia was under sanctions and an arms embargo during the 1990s, yet Greece continued to continue to trade with Serbia. A lot of fuel, a lot of ammunition, a lot of other supplies made their way to Serbia. Later, when the NATO bombing campaign started, there are reports from credible sources that Greek officers within the NATO headquarters passed on NATO secrets and bombing plans to their Serbian counterparts in Belgrade. What does this tell you? Does this mean that to Athens, as far as Athens is concerned, Belgrade was more important of a friend than NATO?
It's a complex question. Concerning as I presented in my book a witness opinion, somebody who was involved and who testified to the fact that during the period of Prime Minister Papandreou, some NATO military secrets were being passed to Ratko Mladic. I would have expected that some Greek judge or the Greek authorities would have asked me, because this is a serious accusation, would have asked me to present the evidence ahead so they could investigate them more. Because this was a serious accusation, this was published around the world, etc. Well, nobody called me. Nobody called me. I mean, they were not interested. On the other hand, I must also say that I could not corroborate the story. I mean, Papandreou was dead. And in any case, I had this witness. It was a credible source. But I really couldn't corroborate the story. So, I mean, I tried also to get information from the Americans, and they refused to provide me with any information on this subject. I think they thought it was a very touchy subject. On the other hand, it was the case that during NATO meetings, the Greek foreign or defense minister were always taking positions which were sort of supportive of, which were sort of supporting of the Serb positions. They were, for example, they would always argue against bombing Serb positions, etc. And they would always, in some way, be of assistance, try to help the Serbs.
But in your opinion, I mean, what are the ties that bind Serbia and Greece? I mean, we know about Orthodoxy being a major, factor, a common history. But was anti-Americanism one of the factors as well?
Yes, I think at the time there was a great misunderstanding, if I can say. I think there were three issues that were involved. One was the issue of the common religion. Another was the issue of common historical relations that go back to the Byzantine Empire, or I don't know when. Another thing which the Serbs very carefully, very cleverly exploited was the Turkish threat. I mean, the Serbs were presenting to the Greeks the war against Bosnians as a war against Turks. Bosnians, in their eyes, were Turks. So the Karadzic and all the other Serb leaders, Bosnian Serb leaders, when they were visiting Greece, they used to say things like, we are on your side, we are fighting the Turks, we will be, if Greece gets ever in a war with Turkey, we will send 50,000 fighters and this kind of thing. I mean, they had a very clever propaganda campaign in Greece. And, the Greek public opinion was affected by those views, was influenced by those views. And I think that was some of the main reasons. And another reason was, unfortunately also here, that some sections of the left saw the fight of the Serbs as a fight against international capitalism and the New World Order. They saw the Serbs as being prosecuted by international capitalist forces, international imperialism, and that they were fighting the fight against imperialism. So in that sense, they were never interested in what was happening really in Serbia, in Bosnia. They were not interested in how many. They believed that the evidence about Serb atrocities were fabricated evidence. They believed that all those things that were being written in the foreign media were fabricated. They didn't believe all those stories. They thought the Serbs were simply defending their land, defending their values against international conspiracies.
Now, Ratman Karadzic visited Greece a number of times during and immediately after the war in Bosnia. How was he greeted by the Greek public?
He was greeted like a hero. He was greeted like a rock star. The biggest, the most amazing event was in 1993 when he came and spoke in a football stadium, where there was, he had access to Papandreou, to Mitsotakis, to the Greek prime ministers. He saw them, they praised him. Papandreou called him a person of peace, a man of peace. Mitsotakis thought that he reminded him of a hero of the Greek War of Independence, all these kind of things. And mind you, Karadzic was invited by the Greek church and by the Greek trade union in 1993, and then he gave a speech which was attended, apart from the masses, from politicians from all political parties. And there he made the famous statement that everybody is asking us to lay down our arms, but we say no. We say no because we have with us God and the Greeks. And it was very well received. I was reading the reports in the papers, about how people would stop him in the street and shake his hand and say things like, "You Serbs are doing a good job, you're doing a great job." And yeah, that was amazing.
Now, over the last 15 years, many things have changed, both in Bosnia, in Serbia, and in Greece. Greece has a new government now led by Alexis Tsipras from the Syriza party. Have Greek and bilateral relations with Bosnia and with Serbia changed in the past? Has the public mood changed over the last 15 years?
There are two different issues. The one issue is whether the public mood has changed over the last few years. There has been no opinion poll, so it's what my impression is. I don't think the public opinion mood has changed very much. It's just that 20 years have passed, and nobody wants to think about it. There are other major problems in Greece now, as you know, and the last thing they could be concerned about is what happened in the Yugoslav wars. So in that sense, and I don't think there has been any major rethinking. I don't think that, I really wonder whether they are going to commemorate 20 years this year from the Srebrenica massacre.
Thus far, there have been no calls for the commemoration of the events in Srebrenica?
Not as far as I know, but who knows? They may try to do something. But until now, there hasn't been any major rethinking. I haven't heard even one politician who has sort of regretted his past actions or thoughts or words, etc., who would say that, for example, I'm sorry about the positions I had at that time, and now I recognize that the situation was not like I was discussing. No, there hasn't been any major calls on the other. That's one thing. Now, when it comes to the new government, it is true that the new government, it's a new government, has less connection with this, what I call dark past of Greece, than the other major political parties. Because after all, most of the people which you found who were supporting the Bosnians were people who were in this left, who were emanating from the left wing, from the Syriza party, which wasn't called Syriza at the time, but that's another story. So in that sense, Mr. Tsipras and his government has the opportunity to make a change and finally come clean about Greece's past. However, the situation is really complex because in Mr. Tsipras's parties, there are some elements, some activists, like one of my friends, Sisi Vovu, who was here in Sarajevo during the war and who was a supporter of the Bosnian cause. Yet on the other hand, he has also very many people in the government who are strong supporters of the Russian positions. And from the moment they adopt the Russian positions on these issues, and etc., so I mean they are not specially inclined to engage in self-criticism.
But in the last years, we've also seen the rise of far-right parties such as the Golden Dawn in Greece. Some of their members are, in fact, former volunteers who fought in Bosnia. How serious is the Golden Dawn?
The Golden Dawn as a party at this point is not serious. I mean, it's not serious. They are going through trial. They don't have more than 5–6% of the vote, and they are a spent political force. I don't know what may happen in the future. Nobody knows. I mean, Greece is in an economic crisis, and Golden Dawn may become strong again, and the nationalist voices. For me, the problem is not Golden Dawn. For me, the problem is the great silent majority of the Greek people who, for one reason or the other, continue to believe the myth that it was the Serbs who suffered most from the war.
Now, over the last 15 years, Greece has sent a small amount of aid to Bosnia. They have renovated some key buildings, including a major government building in Sarajevo in 2005. Do you see these acts as an attempt to amend for past actions, or a very honest policy towards a war-torn neighboring country?
I think it's both. I think in a certain sense it is a partial recognition of the fact that Greece was very one-sided, the approach of Greece during the war. It's also an approach, it's also an attempt by Greece to help Bosnia stand on its feet again after the war. But I think that all this kind of help, there are two issues here. One is what is the best way of helping Bosnia, and the second is what is the best way of helping Greeks develop a correct picture about what happened, and not, once again in the future, support similar things. And the only way you can do that is not simply by sending help to Bosnia, but it's by recognizing openly the mistake, presenting the truth, discussing it widely and openly. And by this way, you educate the people so they don't commit the same mistakes.
After the Holocaust, during World War II, we heard many European leaders and intellectuals cry, "Never again." Yet, genocide was repeated by the Pol Pot regime in the 1970s. It was repeated in Bosnia in the 1990s. It was repeated in Rwanda. As we speak now, the Rohingya Muslim minority in Myanmar are going through, by all accounts, a genocide. Has the world become numb?
It's not exactly a question of the world becoming numb, but it's a question of many conflicting interests which take place at the same time. You see, for example, take Myanmar, the persecution of the Rohingya, and I happened to be in Thailand and in Burma when the persecution started. On the one hand, the world is worried about the Rohingya. At the same time, they are very happy that Myanmar has moved in a democratic direction, and they wouldn't like to do anything which would undermine the government. So you see, states have priorities. And the priorities of the states do not always correspond with what is morally correct.
Right, Mr. Takis, thank you so much for speaking to Al Jazeera.
Thank you very much for having me.
Always trust.
We ask the questions.
What is needed in the world?